Anyone who thought the Michael Jackson film was gonna fail must be crying right now, because the Michael Jackson movie is now tracking to be the most successful musical biopic of all time. Michael has earned 40 million in its domestic opening day, biggest opening day of all time for a biopic, and the biggest box office opening day of 2026. Shamo!
It's been 10 days. To absolutely nobody's surprise, except for the media, Michael is just destroying the box office, and his fan base is just as alive as it was when he was around.
A movie that reportedly spent nearly 5 years struggling just to get made ended up opening on the exact same weekend as the highly anticipated Michael biopic release window, and the results were brutal. The film pulled in only around $475,000, a number so low that people across the industry immediately started raising eyebrows. That's not the kind of opening studios dream about. In Hollywood terms, that's barely a ripple. Some people online even joke that certain high-end restaurants in Los Angeles probably make that much money on a packed weekend. And that film was only one example of the impact surrounding the Michael Jackson rollout. By the end of the weekend, multiple projects were already feeling the pressure, and studio executives were reportedly looking at the numbers in complete disbelief. The box office math looked rough no matter how they analyzed it. Big-budget movies saw attention drop fast, expensive campaigns struggled to hold momentum, and several competing releases were suddenly pushed completely out of the conversation.
I know The Mummy is in production right now.
Wrapped.
Wrapped.
Finished.
Have you seen the cut?
No, it's editing.
Does it feel good though?
I'm very excited about it.
The vibes on set were good?
Vibes are very good. I have a very good feeling about our Mummy.
Inside Hollywood circles, some people were already calling the weekend an outright disaster for the competition. And let's be honest, you already know exactly why this story caught your attention. You clicked because you wanted to see just how intense the fallout really was once Michael Jackson's name entered the picture yet again. The truth is, things got messy almost immediately. The Michael biopic didn't just win the weekend at the box office, it completely dominated it. The film steamrolled through the competition and pushed nearly everything else out of the spotlight within days. Some movies had only been in theaters for a matter of weeks before their momentum suddenly collapsed. Other projects had spent years being carefully developed, marketed, and positioned for release, only to watch their attention disappear almost overnight once Michael entered the conversation. And according to people watching the numbers closely, the fallout spread far beyond just one or two films. Competing studios reportedly started realizing very quickly that audiences were overwhelmingly choosing Michael over almost everything else playing that weekend. But before you can really understand how severe the damage was for the competition, you need to look at what Michael actually managed to pull off financially. Heading into opening weekend, producer Graham King and Lionsgate were reportedly aiming for a domestic opening somewhere around $70 million. Even that number would have been viewed as a major success and a very strong debut for a music biopic.
Why do film critics hate the new Michael Jackson movie, and why are general audiences loving it? The movie just came out this past weekend. People have been making their way to theaters, seeing the movie, and for the most part, they have been coming out of the theater happy with the movie. But before that, of course, there was press screenings, media screenings, and film critics were giving this a really low grade. Now, why is that?
But what happened next reportedly went far beyond what many people inside Hollywood had originally expected. They didn't land at $70 million. They blew straight past it and reportedly opened at an astonishing $97 million domestically. That instantly turned Michael into the biggest opening weekend for any biopic in movie history. Not just music biopics, but every biographical film ever released. The movie reportedly surpassed records set by Oppenheimer and shattered numbers many analysts believed would stand for years. To really put it in perspective, Straight Outta Compton had held one of the strongest domestic opening records for a music biopic for years, with around $60.2 million. Michael didn't just beat that number. It reportedly flew past it by more than 50%. Then there's Bohemian Rhapsody, which opened with approximately $51.1 million and went on to become a global phenomenon. Michael nearly doubled that opening number right out of the gate without showing signs of slowing down. What made the situation even more shocking to people inside Hollywood was that the box office explosion happened despite mixed to negative critical reception. The film reportedly sat around 40% on Rotten Tomatoes, while outlets like the BBC gave it extremely low ratings. Some reviewers criticized the movie for feeling overly polished, emotionally safe, or too carefully managed when it came to Michael Jackson's controversies. A number of critics openly predicted the movie would collapse after opening weekend once the initial curiosity wore off. But instead of collapsing, the audience response appeared to completely overpower the critical narrative. And that's when studio executives really started realizing this wasn't behaving like a normal biopic release at all. The audience reaction told a completely different story from the critics. While reviewers were tearing the movie apart, regular viewers showed up in massive numbers and gave Michael extremely strong audience scores across multiple platforms. Rotten Tomatoes reportedly showed a 96% verified audience rating. CinemaScore exit polls handed the film an A-, and IMDb users pushed it to around a 7.7 out of 10. Critics may have taken their shots, but everyday moviegoers were still filling theaters all across the country. By the end of opening weekend, Michael had reportedly pulled in an incredible $217 million worldwide. That's when Hollywood fully realized this was no ordinary release. This wasn't just a successful biopic anymore. It had turned into a full-scale takeover of the box office conversation. And once that happened, other movies started getting crushed in the process. One of the first major casualties people pointed to was The Mummy, which released on April 17, 2026. What made this situation especially surprising was that this wasn't some low-budget studio experiment quietly dumped into theaters with no expectations attached to it. The project had serious industry backing behind it, including involvement from Jason Blum of Blumhouse Productions, the same producer connected to massive horror hits like Get Out, The Purge, and M3GAN. In other words, this was supposed to be a serious contender. But once Michael arrived, even projects with major names and proven producers behind them suddenly found themselves fighting for attention. The project also had backing from James Wan and his company Atomic Monster, which immediately raised expectations even higher. This is the same filmmaker connected to major franchises like The Conjuring, Aquaman, and Insidious. So when you had Jason Blum and James Wan attached to the same project, Hollywood expected a serious hit. From the beginning, the studio clearly believed The Mummy had strong potential. When it opened the week before Michael arrived, it brought in around $13.5 million domestically. At first glance, that number looked reasonably solid, especially for a horror-driven release trying to build momentum over multiple weekends. But then everything changed the moment Michael entered theaters. Even before Michael premiered, insiders were reportedly already feeling uneasy because The Mummy's opening numbers had come in lower than some early projections. Still, the studio hoped the movie could stabilize and hold on to audiences through word of mouth. That hope disappeared almost immediately once Michael arrived the following weekend. The Mummy reportedly suffered a brutal 58.6% drop and collapsed to just around $5.6 million. In Hollywood terms, that kind of fall-off is the type of number that instantly sets off alarm bells inside studio offices. What had started as a potentially respectable release suddenly found itself completely overshadowed by the sheer force of the Michael Jackson biopic taking over theaters and dominating audience attention. After 10 days in theaters, The Mummy had reportedly earned only around $23.4 million total domestically. On paper, the production budget sat near $22 million, which might not sound catastrophic at first. But industry math rarely stops at the production budget alone. Once marketing, distribution, and theater splits were factored in, insiders estimated the film likely needed somewhere closer to $55 million just to comfortably break even. And at the pace things were going, the movie was nowhere near that safety zone. What made the situation even more painful for the people behind the project was how intentionally they had tried to distance this version from previous Mummy films. James Wan reportedly pushed hard for the branding to emphasize Lee Cronin's The Mummy instead of simply calling it The Mummy outright. The strategy was clearly designed to signal to audiences that this was not another attempt to recreate the classic blockbuster adventure style associated with Brendan Fraser's beloved 1999 version. Instead, this new film was supposed to feel darker, more horror-driven, more psychological, and completely separate from the nostalgic franchise audiences already knew. But despite those efforts to position it as something fresh and modern, the movie found itself caught in the worst possible situation. Opening right before a massive cultural event like the Michael release completely took over audience attention and dominated the box office conversation. They attached a real filmmaker's name directly to the project because they wanted audiences to view it as something elevated, original, and genuinely serious, rather than just another recycled franchise reboot. The studio clearly believed this version of The Mummy could stand apart from older adaptations and build its own identity in the horror space. A lot of reputation, branding, and industry credibility got placed behind that strategy. With names like James Wan, Jason Blum, and Lee Cronin attached, The expectation was that audiences would treat the film as a major cinematic event rather than just another studio release. But then, Michael hit theaters, and within a matter of days, it completely hijacked the conversation. Suddenly, social media, entertainment headlines, audience attention, and box office momentum all shifted toward Michael. The Mummy didn't just lose ground, it practically disappeared from the public conversation almost overnight as the Michael Jackson biopic became the dominant topic everywhere people looked. Victim number 2 was Mother Mary from A24, which released on April 24th, 2026. And honestly, this was the one that genuinely surprised a lot of people inside the industry because A24 usually does a very good job avoiding public box office disasters. The studio has built a reputation around carefully curated prestige films, critical acclaim, and strong audience loyalty. So when Mother Mary started struggling, people noticed immediately. The film was a psychological drama thriller directed by David Lowery, the filmmaker behind acclaimed projects like A Ghost Story and The Green Knight. On top of that, the movie starred Anne Hathaway, which gave the entire project serious award season energy before audiences had even seen a full trailer. On paper, the combination looked extremely strong. A24, David Lowery, and Anne Hathaway felt like the kind of setup Hollywood normally expects to generate critical praise, festival buzz, and prestige success. But once the actual numbers started coming in, the situation quickly turned ugly. The film reportedly earned only around $2.2 million total against a production budget estimated near $20 million, making it one of the clearest examples of how badly certain projects struggled once Michael took over the cultural conversation and dominated audience attention. During opening weekend, Mother Mary reportedly landed all the way down in 9th place, bringing in just around $1.1 million across 1,103 theaters. And when people compared that number directly to what Michael earned during the exact same weekend, the difference looked almost unreal. The gap was reportedly close to $96 million. That number alone had people across Hollywood staring at the box office charts in disbelief. Industry analysts, studio executives, and entertainment reporters all started realizing they weren't just witnessing a successful movie release anymore. They were watching one film completely dominate the market in a way that pushed nearly everything else into irrelevance. But the detail that made the whole situation even more awkward barely got talked about publicly. Mother Mary arrived in theaters only 1 week before The Devil Wears Prada 2, the long-awaited sequel bringing Anne Hathaway back together with Meryl Streep, Stanley Tucci, and Emily Blunt. That meant Anne Hathaway suddenly found herself attached to 2 major releases hitting theaters almost back-to-back. One turning into a massive public struggle, while the other carried enormous franchise expectations and nostalgia-driven hype. One movie was an A24 psychological thriller that practically collapsed the moment Michael arrived in theaters. The other was a massive legacy sequel preparing to help launch the summer box office season. The timing already looked dangerous on paper, but once Michael exploded at the box office, the entire situation turned into a brutal comparison almost overnight. And honestly, one of the strangest parts of the whole Michael phenomenon was the complete disconnect between critics and audiences. You rarely see reactions split this dramatically. Critics came after the film aggressively from the very beginning. The BBC reportedly gave the movie just 1 star, calling it bland, overly safe, and closer to a daytime television drama than a major theatrical release. Other reviewers argued that the story felt too sanitized and too focused on protecting Michael Jackson's image instead of fully confronting the darker controversies surrounding his life and legacy. By the time the early review wave settled, Rotten Tomatoes reportedly showed the film sitting around a 40% critic score. But what shocked Hollywood was that none of the criticism seemed to slow audiences down at all. Regular moviegoers reacted in almost the exact opposite way. The audience score on Rotten Tomatoes reportedly exploded to around 96% verified hot, while CinemaScore exit polls gave the film an A-. IMDb users also pushed the movie to roughly a 7.7 out of 10, showing that general audiences were connecting with the film far more positively than professional reviewers were. That disconnect quickly became part of the story itself. Critics were trying to tear the movie apart, while audiences were treating it like a major cultural event and continuing to pack theaters anyway. The people actually buying tickets made their opinion impossible to ignore. While critics were throwing punches online and publishing negative reviews, packed theaters kept pushing Michael to massive numbers weekend after weekend. And that's what made the whole situation so wild to watch unfold in real time. It wasn't just competing movies getting crushed during Michael's run. Critics themselves started looking increasingly disconnected from what general audiences clearly wanted to see. No matter how harsh the reviews became, Michael kept stacking enormous box office numbers, reportedly pulling in close to $100 million domestically in a single weekend, while the rest of the market struggled to keep attention. Then came victim number 3, Desert Warrior, during the April 24th to 25th, 2026 frame. And honestly, this is where the situation started looking genuinely painful for the studios involved. The film starred Anthony Mackie and had reportedly been trapped in production problems for years. According to industry reports, the project had been dealing with delays, filming complications, development issues, and scheduling setbacks ever since around 2021. By the time Desert Warrior finally made its way toward theaters after nearly 5 years of struggle, the expectation was that it would at least have a chance to establish itself with audiences. Instead, it arrived directly in the middle of the Michael Jackson box office takeover. Arguably, the worst possible moment any struggling movie could have chosen to release. The people actually buying tickets made their opinion impossible to ignore. Critics were attacking the movie online, but packed theaters kept helping Michael dominate the box office weekend after weekend. So it wasn't just other movies getting crushed during this run. Critics themselves started looking increasingly out of touch, while Michael kept pulling in numbers close to $100 million domestically in a single weekend. Victim number 3 was Desert Warrior during the April 24th to 25th, 2026 frame. And honestly, this is where the whole situation started feeling almost painful to watch unfold in real time. The film starred Anthony Mackie and had reportedly been stuck in production limbo since 2021. The project spent nearly 5 years dealing with filming complications, development trouble, delays, and the long struggle of finally making it to theaters. Vertical Entertainment eventually distributed the movie, but the release timing could not have been worse. Desert Warrior opened during the exact same weekend Michael exploded across theaters everywhere. The result was brutal. The film reportedly earned only around $475,000 from 1,010 theaters. Compared to the scale of the release, the number barely even looked real. A movie that spent half a decade fighting its way onto the big screen got buried almost instantly once one of the biggest music biopics in Hollywood history arrived and took over audience attention. And the damage didn't stop with movies opening that same weekend. Michael also started overtaking films that had already been sitting in theaters for weeks, and in some cases, months. That's where the story started feeling almost unreal from a box office perspective. Take Scream 7, for example. The movie reportedly became the biggest opening in the franchise's history, with around $64 million domestically, and stayed in theaters for months. Its entire worldwide total eventually reached roughly $213.5 million. Michael reportedly passed that number in one opening weekend alone. Then there was GOAT, which finished with around $190.5 million worldwide before suddenly looking tiny once Michael entered theaters. Even Send Help from Sam Raimi reportedly completed its full theatrical run with about $94 million worldwide. And Michael flew past that number almost immediately without slowing down. A24's The Drama reportedly finished its entire theatrical run at around $99.9 million worldwide. Under normal circumstances, that would be viewed as a strong and respectable result for a prestige studio release. But then Michael arrived and pushed past that number during opening weekend alone, while the rest of Hollywood watched the box office charts get completely reshuffled in real time. The comparisons only became more unbelievable from there. Scream 7 had already been celebrating what looked like a massive success, with a franchise best worldwide opening estimated around $97.2 million. Most studios would be ecstatic with that kind of launch, especially for a long-running horror franchise. But Michael reportedly matched that number domestically by itself during opening weekend, and then kept climbing once international ticket sales started pouring in. That was the moment many people inside Hollywood reportedly realized this wasn't behaving like a normal movie release anymore. The Michael Jackson biopic had moved into an entirely different category of box office performance, overpowering projects that would normally dominate headlines on their own. And if anybody thought theaters were empty by this point, the reality reportedly looked completely different. Showings for Michael were still packed, with some theaters allegedly selling out throughout the weekend while competing movies struggled just to hold audience attention. At a certain point, the people running the industry could no longer ignore what was happening, and what made their reactions important was that these were not random fan opinions online. These were executives, distributors, and theater insiders whose entire business depends on understanding what audiences are willing to pay to see on the big screen. Michael O'Leary, head of Cinema United, reportedly pointed to Michael as proof that theatrical movies were far from dead. According to him, the film demonstrated that audiences will still show up in massive numbers when they feel they are getting a compelling event worth leaving home for. He even placed Michael alongside major theatrical successes like Project Hail Mary and the Super Mario Galaxy movie as evidence that theaters could still generate huge crowds when the release captured public attention in the right way. Meanwhile, Adam Fogelson, chairman of Lionsgate, gave an even shorter response that quickly started circulating across entertainment media. "If you give audiences what they want," he said, "they will come." And after the kind of numbers Michael reportedly delivered, very few people in Hollywood were in a position to argue with him. That was the full quote from Adam Fogelson. He really did not need to say much more because the box office numbers were already speaking for themselves. Then there was Antoine Fuqua, who had reportedly gone through an exhausting and chaotic production process while trying to bring Michael to theaters. The project dealt with delays, reshoots, non-stop media pressure, and constant online debate long before audiences ever bought a ticket. During an April 26th interview with Deadline, Fuqua compared the experience to one of the strangest moments of his entire career. He explained that he was delivering the director's cut for Emancipation, his movie starring Will Smith. On the exact same day, Smith walked onto the Oscars stage and slapped Chris Rock in front of the entire world. According to Fuqua, the chaos surrounding Michael started feeling strangely similar after a while. Every time the film seemed close to settling down, another headline would suddenly explode online. Delays turned into rumors, rumors turned into massive internet debates, and once critics finally saw the movie, the reactions became even louder and more divided. But what shocked Hollywood was that none of the controversy appeared to slow audiences down in the slightest. If anything, the non-stop conversation only seemed to make more people curious to see the movie for themselves, turning Michael into the kind of cultural event studios spend years trying, and usually failing, to create. If anything, all the controversy and non-stop attention only seemed to make more people curious to go see Michael for themselves. According to reports, several major theater chains actually increased showtimes after opening weekend because audience demand stayed far stronger than expected in multiple cities, and that created an entirely new problem for competing studios. Movies that were already struggling at the box office suddenly started losing premium screens, prime evening showings, and some of the most valuable weekend time slots because theaters were prioritizing Michael instead. Once exhibitors realized the film was consistently filling seats, business decisions became very straightforward. Some studio executives reportedly admitted privately that they had seriously underestimated just how broad the audience for Michael would be. Industry analysts had predicted a strong debut, but very few expected this level of total market domination. What made the movie especially powerful commercially was the fact that it wasn't appealing to just one demographic. The film was reportedly attracting older Michael Jackson fans, younger audiences curious about his legacy, families looking for a big theatrical experience, and even casual moviegoers who normally do not rush out to see music biopics at all. That kind of cross-generational audience reach is extremely rare in modern Hollywood, and it's a big part of why the rest of the industry suddenly found itself scrambling to react. That kind of crossover appeal is incredibly rare, especially for a biopic with a runtime pushing nearly 3 hours. Most movies that long struggle to maintain mainstream momentum, but Michael seemed to keep pulling audiences in from every direction anyway. And once the international numbers started coming in, the situation became even bigger. Markets across Europe, Latin America, and parts of Asia reportedly opened far above studio projections. In several countries, Michael quickly became the biggest opening of the year within just a few days, turning what already looked like a domestic success into a genuine global event. At the same time, rival studios reportedly began reacting almost immediately behind the scenes. Some projects quietly reduced advertising spending, while others started shifting marketing strategies or focusing attention on later release windows to avoid getting swallowed by the same wave of competition. Inside Hollywood, the conversation quickly became much larger than just one successful movie. People started asking a more uncomfortable question. If a film with such mixed critical reviews could still dominate the box office this aggressively, what exactly did that say about the growing disconnect between critics and regular audiences in 2026? That question reportedly turned into a serious discussion across the industry. For years, studios had relied heavily on critic scores, early reactions, and social media buzz to predict whether a movie would succeed or collapse, but Michael completely disrupted that formula. The negative reviews stayed online, critics continued attacking the film, and yet the movie just kept making money anyway, forcing Hollywood to reconsider whether traditional industry signals still carried the same power they once did. Week after week, the audience numbers for Michael reportedly stayed remarkably strong. Instead of collapsing after opening weekend like many critics predicted, the film kept holding attention in a way that surprised even theater owners. And then exhibitors started noticing something even more unusual. A significant number of people were reportedly returning to watch the movie multiple times, something that is extremely rare for a nearly 3-hour biographical drama. Repeat viewings at that level are usually associated with superhero blockbusters, fantasy franchises, or major event films, not a controversial music biopic carrying mixed reviews from critics. In some busy locations, theaters allegedly began adding overnight and late-night showings because demand stayed high deep into the second and even third weekends. That kind of sustained momentum immediately caught Hollywood's attention. Because normally, movies surrounded by controversy and divided reviews lose steam quickly once the initial curiosity fades. Michael appeared to be doing the exact opposite. Streaming platforms were reportedly paying close attention as well. According to industry discussions, several studios allegedly started reconsidering how quickly they moved theatrical releases onto streaming services after seeing how long Michael continued generating strong ticket sales in theaters. Michael reportedly proved something Hollywood had been questioning for years. Audiences will still leave their homes and buy movie tickets in massive numbers if the release feels big enough to become a true cultural event. At the same time, competing films reportedly started disappearing from public conversation almost overnight. Smaller releases lost online visibility immediately, while projects that studios had spent months carefully promoting suddenly looked nearly invisible next to the non-stop attention surrounding Michael. According to reports from inside the industry, one executive even described the situation as a blackout effect, because almost every entertainment headline somehow kept circling back to the film. Box office updates, celebrity reactions, audience debates, viral clips, and social media arguments were flooding timelines every single day. No matter where people looked online, Michael seemed to dominate the conversation. By the end of the second weekend, Hollywood reportedly stopped viewing the movie as simply another successful release. Instead, many insiders started treating it as something much bigger, almost like a warning sign that audience behavior had changed far faster than the industry itself had realized. Antoine Fuqua later admitted he was genuinely stunned by the scale of everything surrounding the project. According to him, the chaos, non-stop headlines, and unpredictable reactions around Michael reminded him strongly of the surreal atmosphere surrounding that infamous Oscars moment involving Will Smith and Chris Rock. Somehow, Antoine Fuqua managed to survive both storms: the non-stop controversy surrounding the movie itself, and the overwhelming pressure that came with turning Michael Jackson's life into one of the biggest theatrical events Hollywood has seen in years. And now, Michael has completely taken over the spring box office, while multiple major releases struggled just to stay visible in theaters. At this point, the biggest question isn't whether the movie is a success anymore. That part has already been answered. Now, people inside Hollywood are starting to ask how far this thing can actually go. The numbers have already shocked the industry, but some analysts and insiders are now openly wondering whether Michael could realistically push toward the billion-dollar mark worldwide before its theatrical run finally comes to an end. And honestly, considering the momentum the movie has maintained so far, that conversation no longer sounds as impossible as it did before opening weekend. So now I want to hear from you. Which movie getting crushed during this Michael takeover surprised you the most? And do you think Michael can actually hit $1 billion worldwide, or does it eventually fall short? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because this box office run has turned into one of the wildest Hollywood stories we've seen in a long time. And if you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share this with somebody else who's been following all the chaos surrounding Michael and the box office takeover.